Okay, so it's day 4. The reading for today, I thought it was gonna be shorter. It doesn't look like it's gonna be shorter. I want to share something that might seem, I'm gonna say dark, but I think it gives really good grounds for why I'm doing this. So stick with me. This is an Alan Watts, the book, which is, I did not read him until recently. He popped up on my YouTube and I've sort of been gobbling up his work since then. He's probably the original Universalist. He was speaking in 1950 to 1970. We're not talking current, and yet you'll see that what he talks about is still applicable in a big way. And anyway, we'll start and see where we go. So he's done a lot of basic work. This connects to a reading from before, talking about how we have mixed ideas of what individual, or we send mixed messages of what the individual is in the Western world. And so we're going to start there. So it says, if then the differentiation of individuals is of great value, on the principle that variety is the spice of life, and we're very focused on diversity at the moment, even though we want everyone to agree with us, which is in and of itself very interesting that we want to support diversity. But if people don't think about diversity exactly like we do, we want to eliminate them, which goes against the very concept of diversity. But that's really going to help us with this, because he's talking about where that sort of, how we become okay with what he calls them as double binds. So things that are mixed messages, so you're set up to fail. Like, you know, you can't limit diversity by disagreeing with people who disagree with it, but at the same time we want to further it, and so it's sort of that mixed message. If then the differentiation of individuals is of great value, on the principle that variety is the spice of life, this value is not going to be enhanced by a self-contradictory definition of individuality. Our society, that is we ourselves, all of us, is defining the individual with a double bind, commanding him to be free and separate from the world, which he is not, for otherwise the command would not work. So in other words, we're being told to be free and separate, but if the world can influence us to think we're that way, then by its very definition, we're not free and separate. Under the circumstances, it works only in the sense of implanting an illusion of separateness, just as the commands of a hypnotist can create illusions. So in other words, we're implanting this idea that we're separate from the world, separate from each other, but it's coming from everyone else, so obviously we're not separate. Thus bamboozled, the individual, instead of fulfilling his unique function in the world, is exhausted and frustrated in efforts to accomplish self-contradictory goals. Because he is now so largely defined as a separate person caught up in a mindless and alien universe, his principal task is to get one up on the universe and to conquer nature. This is palpably absurd, and since the task is never achieved, the individual is taught to live and work for some future in which the impossible will at last happen, if not for him, then at least for his children. We are thus breeding a type of human being incapable of living in the present, that is, of really living. I think this is what I sensed some time ago, which put me on this journey. What is the point? For unless one is able to live fully in the present, the future is a hoax, because there is no future, it's always only now. There's no point whatever in making plans for a future which you will never be able to enjoy. When your plans mature, you will still be living for some other future beyond. You will never, never be able to sit back with full contentment and say, now I've arrived. Your entire education has deprived you of this capacity because it was preparing you for the future, instead of showing you how to be alive now. I don't know about you, but certainly when I was growing up, it was very much that way. Always education, education. In other words, you've been hypnotized or conditioned by an educational processing system arranged in grades or steps, supposedly leading to some ultimate success. First, nursery school or kindergarten, then the grades or forms of elementary school, preparing you for the great moment of secondary school. But then more steps up and up to the coveted goal of university, Here, if you are clever, you can stay on indefinitely by getting into graduate school and becoming a permanent student. Should have done that.
Professional student.
Yes. Otherwise, you're headed up step by step for the great outside world of family raising, business, and profession. Yet graduation day is a very temporary fulfillment, for with your first sales promotion meeting, you are back in the same old system, being urged to make that quota, and if you do, they'll give you a higher quota. And so progress up the ladder to sales manager, vice president, and at last, president of your own show, about 40 to 45 years old. In the meantime, the insurance and investment people have been interesting you in plans for retirement. That really ultimate goal of being able to sit back and enjoy the fruits of all your labors. But when that day comes, your anxieties and exertions will have left you with a weak heart, false teeth, prostate trouble, sexual impotence, fuzzy eyesight, and a vile digestion. All of this might have been wonderful if at every stage you'd been able to play it as a game. Finding your work as fascinating as poker, chess, or fishing. But for most of us, the day is divided into work time and playtime. The work consisting largely of tasks which others pay us to do because they are abysmally uninteresting. We therefore work, not for work's sake, but for money. And money is supposed to get us what we really want in our hours of leisure and play. In the United States, even poor people have lots of money compared with the wretched and skinny millions of India, Africa, and China. Still true. Well, our middle and upper classes, or should we say income groups, are as prosperous as princes. Still true. Yet by and large, they have but slight taste for pleasure. This is in the West. Money alone cannot buy pleasure, though it can help. For enjoyment is an art and a skill for which we have little talent or energy. Yes, we just drink. That makes everything fun. That's not in the reading. I added that. I live close to a harbor packed with sailing boats and luxurious cruisers, which are seldom used because seamanship is a difficult though rewarding art, which their owners have no time to practice. They bought the boats either as status symbols or as toys, but on discovering that they were not toys as advertised, they lost interest. The same is true of the entire and astounding abundance of pleasure goods that we can buy. Foodstuffs are prolific, but few know how to cook. Building materials abound in both quantity and variety, yet most homes look as though they had been built by someone who had heard of a house but never seen one. Silks, linens, wools, and cottons are available in colors and patterns galore, and yet most men dress like divinity students or undertakers, while women are slaves to the fashion game with its basic rule, I have conformed sooner than you, which of course actually means you're cutting edge in fashion. The market for artists and sculptors has thrived as never before in history, but the paintings look as if they had been made with excrement or scraps from billboards. And the sculptures like mangled typewriters or charred lumber from a burned down outhouse. And then there's a subnote I'll add. This is not to be taken as a rejection of modern art in general, but only of that rather dominant aspect of it which claims that the artist should represent his time. And since this is the time of junkyards, billboards, and expensive slums, many artists, otherwise bereft of talent, make a name for themselves by the tasteful framing or pedestaling of objects from the city dump. Then we call it, salvage art or being sustainable in some way. We have untold stacks of recorded music from every age and culture and the most superb means of playing it. But who actually listens? Maybe a few pot smokers. And now you could take that even to the music of today being completely manufactured, uninteresting. The artists are exploited, put on stage, fake names, fake music. They don't play, they don't sing. And then we call them superstars. This is perhaps a Henry Millerish exaggeration. Nevertheless, it strikes me more and more that America's reputation for materialism is unfounded. That is, if a materialist is a person who thoroughly enjoys the physical world and loves material things. In this sense, we are superb materialists when it comes to the construction of jet aircraft. But when we decorate the inside of these magnificent monsters for the comfort of passengers, it is nothing but frippery. I like that word, frippery. I'm going to start using that more. High-heeled, narrow-hipped, dull-type girls serving imitation warmed-over meals. For our pleasures are not material pleasures, but symbols of pleasure. Attractively packaged, but inferior in content. The explanation is simple. Most of our products are being made by people who do not enjoy making them. Whether as owners or workers, their aim in the enterprise is not the product but money, and therefore every trick is used to cut the cost of production and hoodwink the buyer. And we're really running this game out at this point, I feel. By coloring, packaging, and packaging chicanery into the belief that the product is well and truly made. The only exceptions are those products which simply must be excellent for reasons of safety or high cost of purchase: aircraft, computers, space rockets, scientific instruments, and so forth. But the whole scheme is a vicious cycle. For when you have made the money, what will you buy with it? Other pretentious fakes made by other money-mad manufacturers? The few real luxuries on the market are imports from backward countries where peasants and craftsmen still take pride in their work. For example, the state of Oaxaca in Mexico produces some of the finest blankets in the world, and American buyers have been trying to import them in huge quantities. But no amount of money will give the relatively few craftsmen who weave them time to fill the order. If they want the order, they must begin to cheat and produce inferior blankets. The only solution would be to train hundreds of new craftsmen, but Oaxaca is just getting television and has for some time had public education. So what up-and-coming young person would want to waste his day weaving blankets? The poets and sages have indeed been saying for centuries that success in this world is vanity. The worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes. Or, as we might put it in a more up-to-date idiom, just when our mouth was watering for the ultimate goodies, it turns out to be a mixture of plaster of Paris, paper mache, and plastic glue. Comes in any flavor. I have thought of putting this on the market as a universal substance, a prima materia, for making anything and everything: houses, furniture, flowers, bread. They use it already. Apples, and even people. The world, they are saying, is a mirage. Everything is forever falling apart, and there's no way of fixing it. And the more strenuously you grasp this airy nothingness, the more swiftly it collapses in your hands. Western technological civilization is thus far man's most desperate effort to beat the game, to understand, control, and fix this will-o'-the-wisp called life. And it may be that its very strength and skill will all the more rapidly dissolve its dreams. But if this is not to be so, technical power must be in the hands of a new kind of man. In times past, recognition of the impermanence of the world usually led to withdrawal. On the one hand, ascetics, monks, and hermits tried to exercise their desires so as to regard the world with benign resignation, or to draw back and back into the depths of consciousness to become one with the self in its unmanifest state of eternal serenity. On the other hand, others felt that the world was a state of probation, where material goods were to be used in a spirit of stewardship, as loans from the Almighty, and where the main work of life is loving devotion to God and to man. Yet both these responses are based on the initial supposition that the individual is a separate ego. And because this supposition is the work of a double bind, any task undertaken on this basis, including religion, will be self-defeating. Just because it is a hoax from the beginning, the personal ego can make only a phony response to life. For the world is an ever-elusive and ever-disappointing mirage, only from the standpoint of someone standing aside from it, as if it were quite other than himself, and then trying to grasp it. Without birth and death, and without the perpetual transmutation of all the forms of life, the world would be static, rhythmless, undancing, mummified. But a third response is possible. Not a withdrawal, not stewardship on the hypothesis of a future reward, but the fullest collaboration with the world as a harmonious system of contained conflicts based on the realization that the only real I is the whole endless process. This realization is already in us in the sense that our bodies know it, our bones and nerves and sense organs. We do not know it only in the sense that the thin ray of conscious attention has been taught to ignore it, and taught so thoroughly that we are very genuine fakes indeed. This chapter is called How to Be a Genuine Fake, by the way, and Alan Watts has this great quote, I'll say it again and again. He explains that the word person comes from the Latin purse, which means mask, and sona, which means sound. And so it's a mask making sound, a person. That's the base of the word. And so if you're saying you're reading a book about how to be a real person, you're reading a book about how to be a genuine fake. And as recently, I've really been in the question about what's authenticity and what's being real. That really brought me a lot of joy, that quote, because it reminded me that there's only so much realness we can get here. And then this actually explains why I was feeling what I was feeling, because we are being trained to be genuine fakes in so many ways. And then we wonder, well, why don't I feel like I can get real? And I feel like society really doesn't want me to be real. Even on social media, we don't really want people to be real, right? We want them, but don't be too fake. That's the hilarious thing. We don't want to be too fake. So the better you are at faking being real, the further you get, it seems, right now on social media. That's how I was certainly feeling in the coaching industry and making videos, which is why one reason I just wanted to stop and more do this. Flip book for the day. Act from inspiration. Let's see if this goes together. You are physically focused beings with non-physical energy flowing through you, and it is impossible to separate one from the other. You are physically focused beings with non-physical energy flowing through you, and it is impossible to separate one from the other. It's interesting, there's been a lot in these readings about separateness and the illusion of separateness, and I feel like this is really the hitting at the home of that, right? I'm physically focused and I have non-physical energy flowing through me. That's sort of the spirit and the physical. And we like to think there's no spirit, and that's where the separate is coming from. So it's saying here it's impossible to separate one from the other, but we're really trying to. So act. Act as much as you have physical time or energy or breath within you to act. Action is a delicious way to spend life experience. Action is one of the predominant reasons that you have decided to come forth and be in a physical body. I guess probably if you're like floating around all ooey gooey wispy, it's hard to like do stuff. You can't touch stuff, be with stuff. Then there's another quote that says, yes, act all that you want after you have flowed energy towards the outcome that you seek. Let your action be inspired action, not motivated action. Motivated action is doing it because there is a lack if you don't. Motivated action is trying to overcome something. So I guess you feel like you should, or you have to, or because somebody needs you to. Probably done most of my life out of motivated action. Motivated action is very often trying to perform action that someone else wants you to perform. There you go. Let all of your action be inspired action. So how do you do that? You do that by talking about what you want and why you want it. That will bring you to the vibrational connection with who you are. And from that place, you will be inspired to the how and the who and the when and the where. Wow, okay, so I guess with what we just read, it would be Alan Watts was talking about motivated action and where that's coming from sort of in our deep beliefs and training from our community and society and culture, that you're supposed to get somewhere with something, and this is very different. So let's see. Inspired action. How do you do it? You do it by talking about what you want and why you want it. And that's why I'm doing this. Well, I want to feel happy and good. I want to thrive. And I want it because it feels good. And I want other people to thrive too. I want us to enjoy the experience. I want to enjoy this experience, whatever I'm up to. And I think I'll leave it there for the day.